So we're going to be adding the neck to the neck and head to the body. So we're going to go back up here. We're going to score and score. Got to do this top part. Uh-oh, it's pulling away over here. I want to make sure that's nice and scored and there's plenty of slip in there so that it doesn't pull apart. We want these pieces to join together as if they've always been that way. That's the part of the slip and the join. And this is also why I'm using plastic wrap to do this on, or something plasticky, because we don't want it to be sticking to paper, because it'll stick to paper. You can see how flimsy he is right now. He has lots of wiggle room. All right, so I'm gonna put the hands on. I feel like my hands might still be too big. I'm gonna pinch this in half and use each of half of those to make the hands. So I'm gonna do them like a ball, and then I'm gonna flatten them a little bit. Look more like hands to me. So I'm going to score the bottom of the hand where the wrist would be, and the bottom of the arm where the wrist would be. And then I'm going to, so you want to make sure like your arms aren't too long. So if I were to put my little guy out here, I want to make sure when I put his hand on, because this is true for everybody, you can test it on yourself, that your hands end around mid-thigh. Now, you're of course still growing, so it might not be exactly like that. It might be a little shorter or a little longer at this point, depending on how you're growing. But a full-grown adult, their arms end mid-thigh, so it doesn't matter how tall you are, your arms and your legs are in proportion with your body. Score. Slip. Get a little bit of clay in here. We're running out of our slip, so I'm going to have to make some more. Little slip. Little score. Whoopsie, come back. Oh, where'd he go? Oh, that's this one. I forgot to roll him. I was like, what's happening? Score. Do not poke yourself with a toothpick. Be careful. Slip. And join. Okay, and feet. The magic part about feet is our foot is about the same size as from our wrist right here to this crease in our arm. So your foot's about that size. So we want our person to be in proportion. We have to be thinking about those things. Remember we said 3 heads wide. So 1, 2, 3. We've got a little shoulder action happening, which is good. And now we're going to do our feet. So our feet, maybe shorten them up just a little. So I'm going to roll them in a ball, then roll them into a little point. Okay, so I'm going to score. And score on top here. Boop, 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 boop. I think the poke method works really well. There we go. We got 1 foot on. Look at that. It looks good. Okay, so roll into a ball, roll into a little shape that's like kind of a cylinder and a triangle. There we go. So poke, poke, poke. And then poke, poke, poke. So it will be, just so you know, it will be a little bit of a struggle to get these characters to stand. We'll see what we can do. If you can't get it to stand, you can take a picture of it laying down like it is right now. You're going to see at the end of the Nearpod that you have the option to paint it once it's dry. Remember, it has to be completely dry to paint it. I'm going to go in here and kind of, oopsie, he's not sticking too well right there. So sometimes when we try to join, it's kind of like not working. We gotta like let it, it's too wet or something, so sometimes we have to let it sit a little bit, which is why I said you don't have to do this while I'm doing it. I'm gonna form his arms, so think about the action I'm gonna do. I was thinking about the tennis player. Remember, I was putting him up here, gonna take my little toothpick and try to form his hand to be like open, and then this arm to be back here. So remember, I wanted his head turned a little bit, like that, looking at the ball. His foot was like this. This one was more turned up. So I'm gonna try to get him to start making that shape. I think it was like this. Ugh. So while he's still wet, I'm trying to get him in the shape that I want so that he'll dry better that way. And then I can make a tennis racket to put his hand right here if I want to do that. Give him a little eye right there. A little bit of a face happening. I'm going to take some slip and I'm going to smooth out some of these areas. So again, you can use a sponge. You don't want it to be too wet. And sometimes you might have to add a little bit of clay in certain areas to like reinforce it. So while it's still wet, you can add clay and smooth it out. Make sure that your joins are good. So where we did the slip, feel like his leg's a little wonky here. So I'm adding some extra clay so that when he's real flimsy right now. Right now, he's definitely looking like a little tennis player. When I bend his arm, it wants to separate. So I want to take some extra clay and I want to reinforce where it's separating. Don't want it to pull apart like that. So you will get to a point where you won't be able to like add clay anymore. It'll be too dry, and if you try to add clay, it'll just kind of flake away. So you have to be careful. If you add clay, make sure you're still wet and make sure that, like maybe I want to add some clay here to make his chest look a little more normal, not so flat. So I'm going to do the same idea where I score it, and I score it, and I put slip on both. It down. I'm just going to smooth it in there. It's just like a reinforcement. Okay, so our next step is to add details. So we want to add eyes and nose and all that stuff. So to add noses and eyes, we're going to, take little pieces of clay while it's still wet and add those things. So one of the things is if you get to a stopping point, you're going to need to wrap it up carefully and put it inside. You can leave it on this board and try to slip it into some, like a plastic bag that seals, like one of those gallon plastic bags. But if you need to take a break from working on it, you need to make sure that you seal it up tight in something. You can even put it in a plastic container so that you can work on it later. You can go in here and smooth all these areas out. You just have to be careful. And I will say that with the gloves on, it's a little harder. So to do certain things. it's a little more difficult. So personally, I would just use the toothpick. Some people say to use a pencil. To me, the toothpick is fine. I got 2 eyes. His nose would be here. So to create a nose, you would have to add clay. So I'm going to kind of score it like that, and then take some of this really wet stuff. I'm going to try to build a little nose. It's hard to see where it went because of these gloves. See, the gloves are getting kind of, they're drying out and everything's sticking to them. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these off. I'm going to use my hands for the rest of this. Actually pull them off like that so they don't go everywhere. Pull it over the wrist. That's the little trick. You should have some paper towels if you need them. I'm going to bring the light up a little bit. So we're going to be adding some details, so we can add eyes and mouth and ears and make hair. So some of the ways to do these things is to like add a little more clay. Like if I want to make hair, I'm going to add a little bit of clay. I'm going to roll it in a ball. I'm going to press it flat. I'm going to add it to his head. So hair is an extra shape, just like that. I can add ears by doing the same thing. Give him a little ear on this side. He's going to need some hair in the back too, so I'm going to make another piece and whoop, flatten it out. And kind of smooth them together. Need to do his nose. I'm still trying to do that. I don't want his nose to be too big, but I need to like join it and then maybe pinch some of it off. If it's too wet, it's going to be more complicated, and it won't look perfect at first. You kind of have to form it. So this is the side. I'm trying to turn his face forward so I can see what I'm doing better. Get a little extra light on here. That will be lots more helpful. My toothpick. Put the other eye over here. Have some extra toothpicks. So remember, it's a sculpture in the round, and that's why we're talking about all sides of it. So let's see, finish up the hair on the other side. Still form his face a little bit too. I'm going to pull some of that off, smooth it around, take my little sponge, dip it in the water, squeeze out the water so it's just damp, and then use that to smooth some of the edges out. You can even use it as texture for like the hair. Like I have this scratchy part on one side and I can press it into the clay and give him some texture. He's so wet that he wants to just smush into himself. So his face looks a little wonky right now. Fix his neck. He's real blobby. Blobby. Might have to add. So he needs a chin. So he looks like he doesn't have a chin. So I'm going to break a little piece off. Add a little bit of a chin down here. Build his face out a little bit. So these things do take time. You could do all the features before you attach the head.